Free agency is just a few days away. What would the Texans do in the draft if they made some big investments? Welcome into the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans and let's do some mock drafts. That's right, mock drafts, multiple. I wanted to do this exercise to kind of see how the drafts would fall if the Texans made a huge investment along the defensive line, and then if they just did some filling in with the veterans. So we'll go through a couple of different mock drafts, and we'll find out just kind of how the board shakes out and if a big investment at defensive tackle makes a lot of sense, or if spending some money and spreading it out through multiple positions makes a lot more sense for the Houston Texans, as these mock drafts kind of show us how the board shakes out. Now, again, mock drafts are very much about, at this point, hey, let's put a check mark next to a name. Let's pay attention. Hey, if this guy falls in enough mock drafts, do we need to pay more attention to him? For instance, Marvin Harrison Jr. is not getting to the Texans. You don't need to put a check next to his name, but Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, if he starts falling to the Texans in a bunch of mock drafts, maybe you spend a little bit more time learning about him. Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle from Texas, so on and so forth. It gives you a chance to put some check marks next to some first-round names, and then it puts some mid-round names on your radar as well. So the first mock draft we're going to do is if the Houston Texans make a huge investment in free agency. So the big name that's hitting the market at defensive tackle is Christian Wilkins. Justin Madubuike, he stuck around with the Ravens via the franchise tag and a contract extension. Chris Jones is going to hit free agency technically, but it feels like he's headed back to Kansas City. So Christian Wilkins, the Miami Dolphins defensive tackle, is set to hit free agency. And he may command $25 million per year. So if the Texans make that level of investment, they'll have a solidified defensive line, 3 really impressive spots checked with Will Anderson, Malik Collins, and Christian Wilkins, but they'll probably need some help at defensive end. They'll probably need some cornerback help. Really, your ability to fill in around Christian Wilkins is limited because of the big-time investment. Now, you can still put players around him. They're just not going to be as many. Then the second mock draft, well, no big investment in Christian Wilkins. Maybe the Texans make a few B investments instead of a big A investment. We'll go through that here in just a second. But without further ado, Pro Football Focus is Mock Draft Simulator. We're going through 4 rounds of the Texans. That's where they have the majority of their picks. They have 8 picks in this draft, but 5 of them fall in the top 126 selections in this draft, and the Texans have 3 7th-round picks. I'm excited to see what Nick Caserio does with that. But let's get into the draft here. We're not trading with the Chicago Bears, number 1 overall. And I will say, if we see a player start to slip, we'll take a swing at a trade. I'm not anti-trade. We just got to stay very realistic with these trades, and I'm certainly interested in a move back in this scenario because, again, this mock draft that we're about to do, the Texans have signed Christian Wilkins. They've made the big investment at defensive tackle, and so they probably don't need to get a defensive tackle, and they probably do need some cheap talent to fill in around an expensive guy like Christian Wilkins because they probably didn't spend big at some of these other positions. So let's get the draft started and see how this thing starts to shake out. QB, wide receiver, tight end flying off the board. I saw Quinyon Mitchell, one of my favorites from Toledo. He's already off the board. Couple of tackles pushing some players down the board here. And this is where the Texans are. Let's take a quick look at some of the impressive players to come off of the board. Latu is a guy that if he slipped to the Texans, that'd be a no-brainer. Nate Wiggins is a cornerback from Clemson that the Texans should be interested in. Johnny Newton or Jazon Newton, whichever way. He goes by Johnny Newton now. Defensive tackle, he's off the board, but you don't need a defensive tackle. You drafted Christian Wilkins. You don't need a defensive tackle in Byron Murphy. You signed Christian Wilkins, Quinyon Mitchell going 9 odds. That hurts my heart. So the Texans are sitting here at 23. A lot of teams are trading with us. Look what's in this area. It is Big Dallas Turner, one of the most physically impressive players at the NFL Combine. He was an absolute monster at the Combine. He tested out of the gym, so to speak. And him sitting here at 16 after an incredible investment at defensive tackle where you might need some cornerback help, you might need some linebacker help, you might need depth at safety or a wide receiver, I don't know how the way this shakes out, we can't go with Dallas Turner. I mean, the Texans aren't going to draft a tackle in the first round. I like Tyler Nubin, but Nubin's not a first rounder, not at 23. I don't know that I really want to trade out of this spot if I'm the Houston Texans. Look, this thing shakes out this way. Yes, it's another Alabama player. Yes, it's another edge player, but my goodness, let's start thinking about Will Anderson on one side, Dallas Turner on the other, Christian Wilkins in the middle. That's your 3 key defensive linemen for at least the next 3 or 4 seasons. It's too good to pass up. Let's go with big Dallas Turner. Even though some of those trades might be attractive, the player's too good to pass up. So the Texans add a big-time player in the first round of this mock draft. And frankly, at this point, the way that the offseason is played out with, some depth guys and the big investment in Christian Wilkins and the signing of, the drafting of Dallas Turner here, it's turned out to be a pretty good offseason in this scenario, in this imaginary world that we're living in. So we're back to the mock draft here. The Texans are back on the clock, and some really fun names have already come off the board, like Keon Coleman. Drafted a defensive lineman in the first round, so you wouldn't have drafted Darius Robinson from Missouri. Javon Bullard's a safety that could have helped you out right away. Ricky Pearsall is a guy that could have helped. Roman Wilson. So got to look through this board and kind of see if there's some guys that make a lot of sense. Jalen McMillan's a nice player. Don't like him near as much as some of these other wide receivers. Edgerrin Cooper, is a player the Texans should certainly think about. Really impressive linebacker from Texas A&M. Tested better than some people thought he was going to test at the combine. Obviously not taking a quarterback or a tackle. You spent a lot on the defensive line already, so you're staying away. Look, this is the move right here, right? Like, first round pick, I don't like Xavier Worthy. Second round pick, I love Xavier Worthy. 40 record time, punt return skills as well. He plays close to that 40 speed on the field, and you start talking about taking the top off of the defense for the Texans. This one's a no-brainer. We got some trade offers, but we're ignoring those as well. Nick Caserio hanging up the phone when it rings and calling Xavier Worthy with that second-round pick. And I got to tell you, folks, this thing's turning into a dream scenario for the Texans. I'm not in love with Christian Wilkins. I did a video about that. You can check it out. I'll put it in the comment section of this video. But, I don't love the Christian Wilkins investment idea. But in this scenario where the Texans have got Christian Wilkins, to add Dallas Turner and then Xavier Worthy with the first 2 picks, you start fanning yourself and thinking about, oh, my goodness, what a fantastic offseason. And then you look right here, one of the top running backs in the entire class, maybe running back 1 to some people, certainly one of the best running backs in this class, Jalen Wright, right here. And if you spent a bunch of money on Christian Wilkins, you probably didn't invest as much as you would want in the running back spot. You could certainly use a guy like Jalen Wright. Let's take a look at some of these other players. Cameron Kinchins is a guy that is a really impressive safety from just a package standpoint. Not incredible athleticism. He didn't test as well in the combine as he wanted to and as people expected him to, but that's a guy that I know is a fan favorite. I've seen him name in the comment sections a lot. I like his mentality and his mood, just kind of talking to him at the scouting combine. Let's take a look here. There's some corners, there's some safeties, some linebackers. Man, it's going to be tough to not go with what many believe to be the top running back in this class in Jalen Wright. And, well, that's where I'm going, unless there's one of these tight ends that I just love. I like Cade Stover a lot, but I don't know that he brings to the table what you need with Dalton Schultz back. So we're going to go back to the running back spot. Jalen Wright here. And this, again, this draft has turned into a dream draft. Sign me up for this draft. Dallas Turner and Xavier Worthy and Jalen Wright, the first 3 picks for the Texans in this draft, and that would be a dream. Now, again, this mock draft scenario is if the Texans sign Christian Wilkins in free agency and make that big investment at defensive tackle, which means you don't spend as much at some of the other positions. You've got to fill in some depth. Well, depth at the defensive line with Turner, depth at wide receiver with Worthy, depth at running back now with Wright, and let's see what happens here. And another one of my favorite players is on the board. This is a dream draft. Cole Bishop. I call him Shoot Bishop because when I talked to him at the scouting combine, I feel like every fifth or sixth word was shoot. Like, I'm really excited to be in the NFL. Shoot, this is a great opportunity. Shoot. Bishop is a athletic freak. He tested way better than people thought he was going to. He's played a lot of football at Utah, and he is the tight end weapon. He prides himself in locking up tight ends. The Texans need some safety depth on this team. Bishop right here at 124. It's a no-brainer for me. I'm taking the swing. Cole Bishop right there for the Houston Texans. Right back on the clock again. No trade offers, so let's see what is out there. Cooper Beebe is a guard from Kansas State, who the Texas offensive lineman at the scouting combine. The Texas defensive lineman at the scouting combine. So T'Vondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, they talked a lot about Cooper Beebe, but the Texans have already invested so much in the offensive line. It's tough to go there. McKinley Jackson would be some nice depth on the interior of the defensive line. But again, another one of my favorite players is here and available for the Houston Texans, Cedric Gray, who hopes to be a sideline-to-sideline guy at linebacker. And again, my favorite Gray story from the draft process was at the Senior Bowl. There's a little media meet and greet where you can just walk up to the player, chit-chat with them, talk with them. And one guy walked up to Cedric Gray and he said, "Hey, where do you think you've gotten better over the course of this season?" And Gray broke down the play, like had the media member be the wide receiver, he was himself, and broke down how he messed it up earlier in the season, how he did better later in the season. And again, depth is the key thing that you want to acquire here in this draft because you spent a bunch of money on Christian Wilkins. So Cedric Gray, a couple of my favorites in the draft end up on the Texans in Cole, Shoot Bishop, and Cedric Gray. Jalen Wright is fantastic at the running back spot. Xavier Worthy takes the top off of the defense, and then Big Tallis Turner falling to the Houston Texans in round one. I mean, what better? I mean, this draft grade should be an A+. All right, so that's draft one in the books. Christian Wilkins investment at defensive tackle. You get some depth pieces. You get some guys that can impact things right away for the Texans. That was a really fun one for the Houston Texans. Let's flip it over to mock draft 2. Now, this scenario, no big Christian Wilkins investment. So think about something like Jonathan Grenard's coming back. They've got a veteran that they added at the linebacker spot, maybe. Maybe they added a veteran corner, but spent some money on the running back spot. Okay, so gives you a lot of flexibility to do what you need to do here in the first round of the draft. We're going to go to the Pro Football Network simulator for this one. 4 rounds, as we mentioned, and let's fire this sucker up and see what happens. Well, this thing flies through here, and we got very close to Malik Neighbors ending up as a member of the Houston Texans. He is not going to go 22 to the Philadelphia Eagles. He's not getting out of the top 10, I wouldn't think. All right, so a couple of trade offers, not helping the Jags and not dropping out of the first round. Two spots to just add a 7th rounder. No, thank you, Green Bay. And then, 3 spots from Tampa. Add a better middle round pick. You lose pick 86. I see a player that I really want the Texans to draft, so I'm going to reject all of these trades. This one's pretty easy for me. We talked about the investment at a defensive line being closer to the edge, maybe a linebacker spot, some corners, some depth pieces. In the first one, the Texans didn't need to draft a defensive tackle because they had Christian Wilkins. This one, they do need a big-time defensive tackle. Byron Murphy from Texas, one of the best defensive line prospects in the entire draft. He's big. He's nasty. He is the pick here at 23. What a grab by the Texans here. Bunch of good players flying off the board as this mock draft simulator flies through on the Pro Football Network. An extra 3rd rounder to drop out of the 2nd round. No, thank you, Indianapolis. A 3rd and a 4th again to drop out of the 2nd round. No, thank you. Lost wages. So let's take a look at what the Texans have. So they spent the 1st round pick on a defensive tackle. Man, right away, I'm looking at Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky as a guy that is really attractive at this spot. He's the Yak king, according to Steve Smith, the former NFL wide receiver, as he breaks down wide receivers on YouTube. Cedric Gray is a nice player. Already drafted a defensive tackle, or I'd take Braden Viskey from Florida State, which I don't believe he's going to be here. Pro Football Network's rankings are a little bit off compared to Pro Football Focus. Xavier Legette is a guy that is really interesting here. Ricky Pearsall is really interesting. So a lot of interesting wide receiver talent. I don't know that many of them are going to be there when I swing back around. Tavondre Sweat would be an interesting one if you didn't already have his teammate Byron Murphy. So let's stick with the offense. Ben Sinnott's a nice player. Legette is sort of a bigger, more impressive version of Malachi Corley. Corley's got a lot more sort of slot-focused stuff, whereas Legette's got some versatility. Both of them have been kind of deemed Deebo Samuel-esque. I like Corley a lot. I like Legette a lot. I'm going to go with Malachi Corley. I know it's out of character for Nick Caserio to pick a player that didn't go to a Power 5 school, but let's go with Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky. Let's get the Hilltopper in the organization. All right, so a couple of offers here. Hey, move back 2 spots and get yourself an extra late round pick here from Green Bay. That's certainly an interesting one. Move back some spots and get one from the 49ers. Hey, a couple of spots to pick up that and lose a 7th rounder. Let's go ahead and do that. A couple of nice players came off the board. We just traded back, so we're not going to do any more of this. Let's just see what's on here. All right, talked about it already. Already drafted a wide receiver, but I certainly like Tez Walker, an intriguing player from that standpoint. Have gone defense and offense, so you don't have to be beholden to one side of the ball. Jermaine Burton, I like this wide receiver class. It's pretty deep. It's going to be tough to pass up either Bucky Irving, Blake Corum, or Cade Stover here, but let's just keep taking a look just in case. I don't believe Jalen Wright's going to be falling behind some of these other guys, but it's worth taking a look. Big Theo Johnson at tight end is an intriguing name. We're still only in the offensive section. Let's check out and see if there's any defenders that we really like. Trevin Wallace is a pretty athletic linebacker. There'd be some depth there from that standpoint. Austin Booker, the edge from Kansas, is an intriguing prospect. I'm looking at all this, and it's pretty hard for me to not just go with Cade Stover, reunite him with C.J. Stroud, give you some really impressive pass-catching prowess at the tight end position. You're probably going to need somebody to block a little bit better than Stover and Dalton Schultz can, but wide receiver or offensive focused draft so far with a wide receiver in the 2nd round, a tight end here in the 3rd round. Again, we picked up a little extra late round picks that we can use a little bit later, not in this draft necessarily, but if I was the Texans, I could use that pick. Now, we really could use a defender here. Mason Smith, the defensive tackle from LSU, former big time prospect, had some injuries that kind of hurt him a little bit. Malik Mustafa is a guy that can help you at the safety spot from a depth standpoint. We already spent on a tight end, so we're not looking at Theo Johnson here. Jordan Jefferson's an interesting name at defensive tackle. So just going through here, man, this kind of feels like I'm going to go with Malik Mustafa. Get me some safety help here. Back on the clock here in a couple of picks. Okay, futures. No thanks, Baltimore. 3 picks. No thanks. No thanks. Kind of would love to add a secondary piece here in addition to Mustafa, but there's not a corner that I just love in this range. Let's see. Is there a linebacker that I like from that standpoint? Eichenberg is sort of a Henry To'oTo'o-esque type player. What about an edge? Hey, how about Nick Caserio's already kind of gone out of character with one. How about another one? Jalix Hunt tested really well at the scouting combine. Houston Christian. How about a defensive version of Tank Dell? Let's see if there's just one more. You know what? I really liked what Jordan Jefferson did at the Senior Bowl. I know the Texans took a defensive tackle in the 1st round. Do I want to go to a defensive tackle again? Is there an offensive player that I like a lot here? Look, Jalen Wright's not going to be there. I wouldn't think that Marshawn Lloyd's going to be there here in the 4th round. So I'm really not considering those guys. Ray Davis, a lot of carries on him. I don't know that you want to invest in Ray Davis if you're the Texans, especially because you maybe have spent at the wide receiver spot already. I'm not drafting a defensive lineman. We're going with the edge guy. We're going with hopefully hopefully a defensive version of Tank Dell, keeping the guy that played football in Houston. Jalix Hunt, come on down. And the Houston Texans draft shakes out like this: Byron Murphy, Malachi Corley, Cade Stover, Malik Mustafa, and Jalix Hunt. Now, this draft to me is not nearly as impressive as the one that we did the first time around. But the first time around, you get some really good players and some key depth spots. This one, you've already got some impressive players added to the equation, like Jonathan Grenard's back in this second mock draft scenario. You've spent some money on a cornerback in this second mock draft scenario, running back in this second mock draft scenario. So you needed some depth pieces. You needed to kind of fill in and hopefully have some guys that can impact right away. Byron Murphy, that guy. Malachi Corley in the slot at the wide receiver spot for you. Cade Stover's kind of a future luxury pick that you have. And you added a late round pick to move back a couple spots and still end up with him. Malik Mustafa, special teams right away, safety depth. Lot to like about that draft. Lot to like about free agency, which is right around the corner. What did you think of this exercise? Did you like the draft with Christian Wilkins and the big investment there, or did you like the draft with the investments at other spots and without Christian Wilkins and, getting Byron Murphy? Which draft did you like more? Which picks did I screw up? You let me know in the comment section down below. I appreciate you watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll do mock drafts from time to time, and these are a lot more fun after free agency, so be on the lookout for that. And, of course, be on the lookout for all the great free agency content, breaking down moves, and things like that the Texans do. Should they have done this? Should they have done that? So on and so forth. So much more coming as free agency is right around the corner. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. Throw me a thumbs up on this video. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.